How's it going, everybody? Brian Alvarez here on Wrestling Observer Live. We are here for the next 2 hours talking pro wrestling and mixed martial arts. We're going to be joined today by our guest co-host, Carl Stern. We'll be talking the history of wrestling, plus following the Backlash pay-per-view tonight. If you want to call in, any questions, anything you want to discuss about pro wrestling or mixed martial arts, you can call in at 1-800-878-PLAY. You can send emails to Brian at WrestlingObserver.com. That's Brian with a Y at WrestlingObserver.com. We'll be taking your phone calls and your emails throughout the evening here tonight, and a lot of different news, notes to talk about, a lot of things to discuss. Carl, how you doing tonight?
Doing really well. Tonight's Backlash, so, and I don't know what your opinion on the show is, but it looks like the B show of all B shows tonight.
I actually think this show's going to do a little better than your average B show, because I think people are interested in the Shawn Michaels-Batista match. It's something they haven't seen in a long, long time, and it seems like something somewhat special. And I think that people are going to be interested in the Big Show versus the Great Khali. And maybe nobody that's actually listening to this program would be interested in that match, but I just think that your average fan who sees two giant men that are going to have a fight are going to be fascinated to see that fight. So I think this will do a little better than average, but I do think that looking up and down the card here, it's a rematch from WrestleMania. It's a rematch from WrestleMania in a three-way that is now a four-way with JBL being the addition. It's a Kane Chavo rematch. It's a lot of rematches up and down the show. So I think we'll run down the card here very quickly, and I'll get your thoughts on all of the matches. The 12 Diva Tag Team Battle. It's Mickey, Maria, Ashley, Michelle, Cherry, and Kelly, the babyface girls, against Beth, Melina, Jillian, Layla, Victoria, and Natalia. Your thoughts on that match?
Well, to be honest with you, that's a perfect example of why I think this is really a B show. I agree with the Shawn Michaels-Batista match coming up, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but I'm just not excited about anything that's on here. And this 12-woman diva match, I don't know. I could understand. I guess I could see Beth Phoenix. She owed a victory over Mickie James since she won the title. I don't know, but the most important thing is I could not care less. This is absolute. This is one of those things that if you buy the show a few minutes late, if this is the first thing on there, I don't really know how you can be too mad about it.
My only comment very quickly on the women's match is it is just basically a match where they took all the women, they put them in a match together, and I think it'll be all right, if only because when you have so many women, and obviously a limited amount of time, it'll be everybody doing one spot and getting the hell out of there, and I would much rather see that than, for example, a Kelly versus Maurice match or something of that nature. So it could be worse, but it's not like anybody cares at all about this match, as you noted. We should talk about the MVP versus Matt Hardy match, since that match is opening up the show. Your thoughts on that one?
This has been consistently one of the better programs WWE has had for the last, I guess this thing's going on, a couple of years now, on and off. It's tough to ever call the winner in this because it's been kind of back and forth. I have really grown into a fan of MVP. When he first started out, he looked a little spotty, but he's really one of the most improved workers WWE has, and he's become quite entertaining, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with this match. It's one of those feuds that has seemingly gone on for such a long time, but to me it hasn't really gotten stale yet. I just feel like MVP is going to win tonight, but it's one of those things that it could go either way, really. It's a kind of a flip of the coin kind of deal.
Yeah, I think MVP is going to retain tonight. I could be wrong. I thought that the program was actually really heating up before Matt got hurt. He had the appendix deal, I believe. His appendix burst, and that put him out of action for quite a while. And I thought it was really heating up, and then he was out of action for a long time, and so they had to move on to other things. And then he made his big return at WrestleMania, and everybody went crazy, and I thought, wow, they can reignite this feud. And instead, they wrestled on the very next show, just for no reason. They just had a match that went on forever, and I think that really took the heat off the whole program. And they tried to do something last night, and arguing about their tag match or their tag team from 6 months ago, and it just sort of, to me, seemed like, wow, this was something a while back, but it's not really anything right now. They need to put some more heat back on it. So hopefully, they'll do that tonight, because I just think that Matt winning it tonight, sort of, after all the time that MVP has had that title, it just would kind of come out of nowhere, really. At least that's sort of the way I feel about that. So, anyway, that's that match. I guess we shall see what they end up doing there. We've got the Big Show and the Great Khali, which should be horrible. They had a horrible match on the house shows last week, and they're going to be doing the big battle here. Khali's going back home for about a month after this match. They may do an injury angle, and hopefully they keep this relatively short. I think on a big stage it'll be okay, but I don't really have high hopes for this baby.
Oh no, it's this is on there strictly to sell the two big guys, give them something to do, give them on the advertisements and get them out there. And because Big Show's coming off the big WrestleMania push with Mayweather, obviously Big Show's got to win this, because as you pointed out, Khali is going back home for a little while, and so this is to further Big Show's push. And I'm interested to see, really, more so than this match, which is, has the potential, as you said, to be quite horrible. I'm really more interested to see where they go with Big Show after this match, because he's been kind of flirting with both heel and babyface, and it's going to be interesting to me to see exactly what's next on the schedule for him. Maybe you have some idea, but I'm not real sure. But I think they need to solidify his character one way or the other. I would like to see him either be straight up a heel or straight up a face, and get a big push in either direction, really.
I almost think that he's supposed to have been a babyface since before WrestleMania, but the Khali thing here is strange in that I guess Khali's supposed to be heel, but sometimes he comes on TV and does stuff, and you're like, that's a friendly giant man. He could, maybe he's a babyface. I don't know. So it's a strange battle, and the whole thing is strange, but it should make for quite the spectacle this evening. Shawn Michaels and Batista, many people would consider this the main event of the show in certain ways, at least the match that they most want to see. It's an interesting match. Batista's sort of kind of been floundering, and Shawn Michaels coming off the win over Ric Flair in the retirement at WrestleMania, and it started out a storyline where Batista was mad at him for retiring Flair, and then sort of became Batista just being upset about things that Shawn Michaels had done before many people in the audience were even born. So we've got this battle here tonight. Shawn's always been able to have good matches with big guys, many big guys far more limited than Batista. And Batista's, he's hit and miss. He's had some great matches with Undertaker and other guys, and he's had some pretty bad matches with certain people, but I expect this match to be good. They've got Jericho in there as a special referee, so they could tease him turning on one guy or the other, or maybe nothing will happen. Seems kind of a waste to put him in there if nothing's going to happen, but I would expect that Batista gets the win here since Shawn cost him the match against Undertaker at SmackDown. Maybe Jericho will turn on Shawn and set up some sort of feud right there. Maybe not. Maybe there'll be some sort of disputed finish, and we can do another Shawn-Batista match since, they could have a program here, 2 or 3 matches before you move into the Jericho deal, but it should be good, I would say.
Well, the build-up to it's been very good, even though they've kind of moved away from the Ric Flair part of the storyline. I think it was kind of necessary that they did and establish some reason for these two not to get along, and the reasoning's kind of weak, but still, at least they are moving in their own direction. It would make the most sense if you were doing old-school booking, I think, to have Jericho and Batista both turn heel at this point on Shawn Michaels, but the problem with that is Batista is on SmackDown and Michaels on Raw, although this could, as you pointed out, I think the most likely scenario is this setting up something for Shawn Michaels and Chris Jericho. Since Jericho's return, he's been sort of lackluster. He's had really no direction, and he's another one of those guys that the coming back as a babyface, I think, was the right thing to do. They had really no way of knowing it was going to flounder like it did, and I think the timing's pretty good right now for Chris Jericho heel turn, and this would, in my opinion, be the place you would do that.
They need some heels on SmackDown too, although I don't know where he'd fit into the title scene with Undertaker. May as well talk about that match right now. Undertaker and Edge for the title. Undertaker last year was scheduled to have a long title reign, but he got hurt, and thus that whole thing went under, and I guess they're starting over again fresh this year, so I would not expect him to lose the title here. Anything can happen, but I think the chances are very, very slim. But I thought they had the best match on the show at WrestleMania. I was there live, and it certainly was, from a live perspective, maybe the biggest thing on the show. And it was a great match, so I expect them to have a pretty good match tonight. I don't see a match at the level of what they did at WrestleMania, but I still think it'll be pretty damn good. So that's the world title match for the SmackDown side.
I think you kind of have to package that match along with the ECW match as well with Kane and Chavo. I almost hope, really, that there is some kind of storyline between those two matches with Chavo and Edge, and one of these two I feel like are going to get cost the title, and I'm like you, I doubt it's going to be Undertaker, but since, to kind of talk about that match, you also have to talk about the Kane match, and I think if either one of the two are going to drop the title tonight, it would be Kane, although, he squashed Chavo at WrestleMania, and I really don't think he's recovered from that. And Chavo wasn't always he was kind of baffling as the choice for ECW champion to start with, but if you take the entirety of the storyline, it would make sense for one of the two to get beaten out of the title tonight.
Yeah, I mean, they could do something where in the ECW match, Edge helps Chavo win the title, and then obviously that leads to the main event where Chavo tries to help Edge win, and it could lead to a cool near fall right there at the finish, and then Undertaker, of course, retains. But that could end up happening tonight. I wouldn't be surprised. Wanted to quickly mention that the opener is over, and Matt Hardy did, in fact, win the title from MVP, so shows you what I know. He's the new champion. They're putting it over as the biggest win of his career, the biggest singles win. I think at one point in the storyline they said he'd never won a singles title before, which is not, in fact, correct, but I guess the Cruiserweight title no longer exists, so you can make that statement. The main event four-way, and my prediction there is most likely Triple H wins the title tonight. He was scheduled to win the belt at WrestleMania, but they did a last-minute change because they figured everybody knew it was going to happen. And you've got a four-way tonight. It's an elimination match. So if you follow the storyline dating back to the middle of last year, it really would make sense for it to come down to Randy Orton and Triple H, and then Hunter pins him clean. I would guess that JBL goes out first, Cena goes out second, maybe when somebody attacks him, who knows. And then you've got the one-on-one match for the title, and Hunter wins. For what it's worth, the preview for Raw tomorrow says new champion, but of course that means really nothing because that can change at any time. But that would be my guess tonight. Carl, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I want to go out on a limb here and make a different prediction. I actually think Randy Orton is going to retain the belt tonight because I think it's gotten out there pretty much all over the internet today that title change is expected, and it's all, of course, as you said, based on the Raw preview. So WWE has gotten in a pretty, what I think is a bad habit. I think you should just go with whatever your plans were and not be booking on the fly like that, but I really think that it's out there enough that Orton's going to retain tonight, and Triple H may be held off just a little while longer, but that's my only reasoning behind that is just the fact it's gotten fairly well publicized today.
We had another major title change today as Shinsuke Nakamura of New Japan dropped the belt to Keiji Muto, and we have a caller that wants to talk about that. Chris in New Jersey. Chris, what's going on?
Hi, what's going on?
How's it going?
So.
Not too much. Can you talk right into the phone? We can barely hear you.
Oh, can you hear me now?
There we go.
All right. I heard about that title change this morning. Pretty shocking considering they've been pushing Nakamura to the moon, and Keiji Muto is the president of All Japan. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah, this is actually, I think, the second time that somebody from All Japan has won the title, and I don't think nowadays it's as big a deal just because the wrestling landscape is such that you've got so many guys going back and forth to different promotions. I was surprised. I actually heard that Muto was challenging for the title, and I really thought little of it. I talked to somebody about it, and they thought little of it, and figured it was just going to be another title defense for Nakamura, and instead Muto won. And I don't really know why. I guess in one sense you had a lot of guys that could have challenged Nakamura for the title, and he beat most of them, and there weren't a lot of guys left that people would take that seriously. Everybody would, there are names that people would throw out there, but he's beaten them. And this is at least something fresh. Apparently it got over huge and got a big reaction, so maybe for the time being it'll work. I think it's strange that they chose Nakamura over Tanahashi because of Nakamura's shooter background or his amateur wrestling background, and then from there they went to Muto, but I don't know. They do many things that I don't understand, but that was a weird one.
Well, from what I'm guessing, that they're going to just have a whole bunch of Muto title defenses, and then at the Tokyo Dome next year, they're going to have Tanahashi go over him, so I guess it's all going to turn out for the good.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things they can do with Muto as champ, as long as that he can go. And I think that him dropping into Tanahashi would be a good idea. And yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different things you can do with this, and apparently it worked. So if it worked, I think it's a good thing.
All right, thanks a lot.
All right, thanks very much for the call. Let's go to Brian in New Jersey that wants to talk about the women's title match tonight. Brian, what's going on?
Hey, Brian.
Hey, what's up?
Brian with a Y in their name.
That's right.
Hey, is Carl there too?
Yes, Carl's here.
Okay,
Yes.
I got a question about the women's title match.
Okay.
Okay. You'll be swell. You'll be great. Gonna have the whole world on a plate. Starting here. Starting now. Honey, everything's coming up. Roses for me and for you.
Well, thank you very much for that call. Not sure what that had to do with the match, but a fine job of singing there here on the air. Let's go to Arnold in Mississippi who wants to talk about CM Punk and the Hardys. Arnold, what's going on?
Hey, man, what's going on?
What's up?
Not a whole lot. Couple questions. Your thoughts on, well, obviously Matt got a little push tonight, but why Jeff Hardy would be getting a heavyweight push and Matt never seems to get a break in that area? And secondly, what's your thoughts on CM Punk's recent big push, maybe even to main event level since he's got the Money in the Bank?
Carl, you have any thoughts on that? I'll let you start.
Well, I'm having a little trouble hearing him, but I believe the question was, why has Jeff got some heavyweight pushes besides, and not Matt, is that correct?
Correct.
Well, I think Jeff has some dependability issues, some trust issues that have, as you currently see, he's suspended right now, and I think that has, to me, Jeff has connected with the audience more so than Matt, but because of his dependability issues, let's just call him that, has really held him back from doing anything big. But the reason Matt, I think, has got even less of a heavyweight division push than him is Jeff just has this unique kind of inexplicable charisma that identifies with the fans. And the only other person I've really ever saw that had this kind of unexplainable connection was Kerry Von Erich. He just had this thing that connected with people. I think Jeff has that too. Jeff is, of course, a very good wrestler, and so is Matt. Neither are particularly what you would classify as charismatic in the traditional sense, or, you know, when people think of charismatic wrestlers, they think of people like The Rock and Ric Flair, and certainly Jeff or Matt, either one, fall in that category. But Jeff just has that intangible thing that seems to connect with people, and I think that's kind of why he has gotten the heavyweight pushes in the past, and Matt not so much so. There is a strong grassroots kind of fan base for Matt Hardy that they've never really tapped into appropriately, I don't think, and I think actually that kind of cult following Matt Hardy has actually helped to hold him back some. It's one of those things, WWE is infamous for it. They're going to tell us what they want us to cheer for. They're going to tell us what they want us to believe is cool, and sometimes when people go against the grain, they're going to push against that even harder, if that makes sense. And I think that's why Matt Hardy has never really broken through to the degree Jeff has, despite Jeff's having somewhat more baggage than Matt has.
All right. I want to say also about CM Punk, I'm not sure how far they're going to go with him, obviously, when you mentioned the Hardys, the plan was for Jeff to win Money in the Bank and probably cash it in around SummerSlam, maybe against Hunter or something like that. And once he got suspended, they had like a matter of weeks to decide, okay, well, if he's out, who's going to win this Money in the Bank deal? And they went with Punk. And it's strange to watch how they use him because they give him somewhat of a push. I mean, he went to the finals of the King of the Ring. He won, obviously, the Money in the Bank. They're always doing something with him, but it's always to a certain degree. Like, if you look at his win-loss record since he won Money in the Bank, I mean, this is like Rey Mysterio when he won the title. Like a guy that he's always losing. He lost the night after Money in the Bank clean to Chris Jericho. He lost in the finals of the King of the Ring. He lost to Edge on SmackDown. He's always losing, but they're still sort of giving him this push. So it's almost like they realize this guy's popular, this guy is somebody that can sell merchandise for us, but we don't take this guy seriously enough to really give him that big push all the way to the top. And I think he's probably going to end up stuck in that slot for a long time.
Yeah, I agree. I thought that he got to the finals of King of the Ring just because they didn't really want to have, Jericho job to Regal, and Matt losing might actually have diminished his win tonight. Even though I like Regal as King of the Ring, I think that was cool. Regal's a great wrestler and deserving of that win. So.
Yeah, tomorrow is Regal's coronation on Raw, so that should be awesome. And I also, we'll talk about that in just a moment, but anything else on that call?
No, one last thing is TNA's coming to South Haven, Mississippi. I think it's great, right outside Memphis. It's where I live, so looking forward to that. I strongly recommend you go. I've said a lot of things about Impact, but I wish they'd bring a house show up here because, in fact, the Motor City Machine Guns worked a show that I was on this past Friday night, and they were awesome, and Awesome Kong was there, and she was great, and house shows are apparently always awesome, so I would check that out if I were you. Yeah, I've got tickets to Slammiversary, so it ought to be great.
Well, cool. Well, thank you very much for the call.
Appreciate it.
And Carl, the King of the Ring was this past Monday, and William Regal is the new king of World Wrestling Entertainment, and it's a perfect man. There's no better man in this world to be the king. And as I mentioned, his coronation is tomorrow. And what do you think of the tournament and Regal in general?
That's one of those things. It just dawned on me as the tournament was going on. Why haven't they done this before? He is exactly the perfect candidate for the King of the Ring gimmick, and I'd never thought about it before myself, but after seeing him win the tournament, I thought, why did this never occur to him before? He's perfect for the role. I'm very happy to see him back wrestling on a regular basis now, instead of just in the general manager's role, which he did a fine job with the general manager's role, don't get me wrong, but I love William Regal's matches. He wrestles a different style, the European style that is really so fresh compared to the typical bland WWE cookie cutter style. It sticks out, and it makes for some interesting freshness, I guess, is the only real way to describe it. And William Regal, a better King of the Ring, there could not be. And I don't know why this idea never occurred to him before. It never occurred to me before, but 2 thumbs up. Kudos for William Regal as King of the Ring.
Yeah, it never occurred to me. I mean, when I was thinking about who could be the King of the Ring, I was thinking MVP and this and that, and as soon as he came out, I was like, hello, there's your King of the Ring. There's no better man to be the king. And that's William Regal. The Kane Chavo Guerrero match is over. Kane ended up, I guess, chokeslamming him for the pin. And there you go. That's that. Big Show versus Great Khali is up next. And Carl, we had a question here, an email question I'll ask you very quickly. Fedor and Tim Sylvia, your thoughts on who would win that fight if it happened?
Fedor will absolutely demolish, destroy, and any other adjective you can think of that involves Tim Sylvia getting completely killed in the ring.
So you have no faith in Big Tim?
I don't even know what kind of rules you could come up with to make this match competitive. Fedor is going to, that Fedor, I would bet big money on Fedor on that fight.
You know, there was actually a period in time where Fedor's people were not hot on the idea of him facing Tim Sylvie because they thought it was a bad fight for Fedor, believe it or not. And apparently, I would guess after Nogueira beat Fedor, they decided, maybe it wouldn't be so bad after all. So, yeah, I would favor Fedor, obviously, in that fight. Obviously, anything can happen in a battle. But, yeah, I would think that Fedor would take that particular match right there. Let's go to Eric in Buffalo, who wants to talk about Jeff Hardy and TNA. Eric, what's going on? Eric, are you there?
Guys.
If you're there, you're going to have to scream into the phone because we can't.
Hello.
There we go.
All right. What's going on, guys?
What's going on?
Hey. All right. Well, you guys pretty much covered a lot of the Jeff Hardy questions that I had. My feeling, I guess, was that once he comes back, I mean, you know he's not getting pushed right to the top, but with that fan base he has, it's going to be kind of hard to keep him down, you know, having matches with Snitsky. So, I mean, he's got to be somewhat close to the top, I would imagine, when he comes back.
Yeah, I think a lot of it also depends on what he was suspended for. I mean, we don't know, but friends of his said this is not something to be gravely concerned about. It was a stupid thing that he did on a particular day, and he was suspended, and you know, if that's the case and he's getting great reactions and they see money in him, then it may be tough for them to not end up pushing him. I think obviously right now they're saying, well, you know, he's absolutely not going to get a push at all when he comes back and this and that, but you've got guys like Orton who also, I presume, are on 2 strikes. I think some people could come up with like 3 or 4, but presumably he's on 2, and he's the world champion as of right now. So, you know, it's Jeff Hardy. He was getting over huge. He did screw up twice, actually, after major pay-per-view. Like, he screwed up right before SummerSlam and right before WrestleMania, which it's a lot hard to justify pushing a guy when he screws up with that kind of timing, but you never know. I mean, Carl, what are your thoughts as far as when he comes back? How long do you think it'll be before they start pushing him to the top again, or do you think it's going to be a long time?
It's hard to say because what could you really do? I mean, he is one more strike and he's out if they go by the policy as it is written. But as you pointed out, there are others, including Randy Orton, who it hasn't seemed to hamper their pushes. For a long time, I thought there's no way you can push him when he comes back. There's just no way, because at any point in time he could be gone. But the other side of me says, well, take advantage of him while you've got him, and maybe even if you know this is his last strike, you get whatever mileage you think you can get out of him, which I think with Jeff Hardy is a lot. I think after rethinking it, maybe you do take this as the opportunity to do whatever the biggest plans you had for him are, to do that, because you might not get another chance, and that might be the thing that gets his head on straight. I don't know if not, you've at least got the maximum benefit out of using him that way.
Anything else, Eric?
Yeah, my other question is on TNA. I mean, you know, every week, no matter what they do, whether it's a live WrestleMania show or whether it's, you know, taped 4 months in advance, they're still getting that same 1.0 rating, which I guess, you know, Spike TV must be somewhat happy with that at this point. But so what is it, I guess, that they can do short of bringing in Hulk Hogan and Brock Lesnar to, you know, get to that next step, a 0.5 up from what they are now?
Well, I think the problem, the 1.0 that they've got right now, the 1.3 million people, I think it's just a very hardcore group of people that are going to watch that show every week, and most of them probably aren't WWE fans, and they don't want to watch Raw and SmackDown, and this is their alternative, and they're going to watch it. In order to bring that up from a 1, you've got to get new people watching the show, and they never get new people watching the show. This is roughly the same audience they've had for like 2 straight years, and in 2 straight years that means they've created almost no new fans. And if you actually watch the TV and you watch it from the perspective of somebody that's tuning in for the first time, like if you'd never seen TNA before and you just happen to switch channels and there it was, if you imagine watching that Impact show as a first-time fan, I can't imagine anyone ever coming back to watch it a second time, because it's so confusing. And this has actually happened to me before, where I've missed a week, and I've tuned in the next week, and you try and figure out what you missed, it is impossible. I mean, if you don't watch every single show, you tune this program on, and the opening recap of the week before is 60 seconds long, and it's just a hodgepodge of things, and you can't figure out who's a babyface and who's a heel and who's with who, and the storylines don't make any sense, and there's really nothing there that I can see a new viewer watching and going, wow, I've got to watch this show every week. So, you know, when they do a huge match like Kurt Angle and Samoa Joe for free, and it does a 1, and they're shocked, to me, I'm not shocked at all, because I don't know why it would be any better than a 1. It's what they always get. They don't seem to have a product that at least on television makes you want to tune in the next week to find out what's going to happen. It's just a wrestling program that caters to 1.3 million people, and it's been like that for 2 years, and it has not changed in 2 years, and it doesn't look like they're going to make any changes in the next 2 years, so I don't see anything changing.
Well, how can somebody jump on board with that show? Because you think about, just step outside the world of professional wrestling for a while, think about any other television show you watch. If you turned on a new, let's say, a primetime drama, how are you going to get into a show that has 10 million storylines, and it just goes from point to point to point to point, and you have no idea? They need to concentrate on doing one thing very well, and then the other stuff will fall in place. When WCW took off red hot with during the Monday Night Wars era, the NWO was the thing most people latched onto. Now, it helped their cause that they had some phenomenal undercard stuff going on at that time with the luchadors and the wrestlers from Japan and so forth. They had a real good, strong underproduct, but the hook that brought in everybody was the NWO, and that whole anti-hero storyline going on. Impact, TNA, has nothing but 1,000 mid-card situations going on, and there's no way to follow it with any rhyme or reason and know what's going on. I don't care who you bring in. They brought in Kurt Angle. They brought in Booker T. I mean, you could bring in Hulk Hogan. You could bring in whoever you wanted to, and in a month's time, they're going to be one more of a million mid-card things.
Anything else, Eric?
I want TNA to get better and succeed so the WWE won't suck so much. So they got to have.
So do we all. That's what's so frustrating about it. There is nobody out there that wants to see TNA absolutely fail. Everybody wants to see TNA do better, but good grief, the formula that they've got is not working.
Sure is.
All right, Eric. Thank
guys.
you very much for the call. Let's go to Mike in Tennessee, who wants to talk about Ric Flair.
Yeah, I was just calling, will Ric Flair ever hold a part again in the WWE? Or is he officially retired?
He probably will not. I mean, it's ridiculous to say he'll never wrestle again, but he seems to think he's never going to wrestle again, and I don't expect him to wrestle regularly ever again. He may have one match here and there way down the road, maybe a tag team match everybody always talks about with his son Reed, but as a wrestler, he's done. They did just send him down to Houston to do a bunch of promo stuff for next year's WrestleMania. He's got his DVD coming out, and you would think with a big DVD coming out, they'd want to get him on TV in some role, even if it's just to come back and do an interview and then disappear again. I think you'll see him here and there, but he's certainly not going to be a regular player on TV from this point forward.
Right. Yeah, I guess I just, I'm originally from Charlotte, and I've watched him since I was a kid, and I guess I just missed the days of the Horseman, and when he retired, it's just like, what's the sense in watching wrestling anymore? Because I guess I'm kind of like the old school wrestling fan with the Horseman, the Magnum TAs, the Rock and Roll Express, and I just feel like that era is, it's slowly diminishing.
Yeah, you would be best served getting a WWE 24/7 subscription and looking for some good stuff on there, because it's sadly the game has changed in pretty much every conceivable way. So.
Well, Brian, you best served listening to the Carl Stern Classic show at Figure 4 Online.
That's right. Carl's always talking the history of wrestling, so that's his era as well.
Right. I guess, like I said, I guess I just miss them days. I mean, wrestling to me now is my kids can't watch it because, like you said, the divas, I mean, the bathing suits, and I tried to pull up on YouTube some of the old wrestling clips, and they think it's funny. But I guess back then to me it was wrestling back then.
Yeah, it was. There were a lot of things about that period that were far more fun than a lot of things that you'll see today. But it's a new group of people, and the people in charge have Vince McMahon obviously has a different vision of what wrestling is, and then the people in TNA very clearly have a different vision of what wrestling is. So, those days are gone.
Yeah, I just like to see Bad Street USA come back with the Freebirds.
24/7, I'm telling you.
Hey, thank you for taking my call.
All right, thanks very much. Carl, I presume you've got 24/7.
No, it is not offered by DirecTV.
That's right. That's right. We have discussed that before. That sucks.
I know. It's absolutely horrible. That's one of the things, though, that WWE has, even though the product's different today, and even though they have in their mind a formula that they want to go by, there are a lot of little things that these Hall of Famers and classic guys could be teaching. Just simple stuff like the best people who ever threw a punch in professional wrestling, Jerry Lawler, Michael Hayes, both. Well, one of them, not so much so right now, but they are involved in WWE. Just a seminar with your trainees about how to throw a good worked punch. Think of all the great interviews they have working for them. Again, Jerry Lawler, Ric Flair, Michael Hayes, Dusty Rhodes, all these people, fantastic delivery. Have seminars with your trainees on how to deliver. They've got these great classic tools to work with, and even if that's not the style, match, and formula you want to use anymore, some of those little things like that add up to things that would help the overall product if they would go that route.
Wanted to mention that the Big Show versus Great Khali match is over. It was horrible. The Big Show won. The Great Khali did not do an injury angle, so I guess he's just going to be off TV for a month and then just come back. So anyway, that is the update there. And we are moving on to the Shawn Michaels-Batista match right in the middle of the show. An hour in. I don't know why, but that's coming up there. And we had promised that after the break we would talk about Michael Hayes. I'll just very quickly mention the story. We'll probably have to discuss it after the break. But basically, Michael Hayes, SmackDown writer, WWE executive, suspended for 60 days for making racial remarks to Mark Henry at a WrestleMania after party when he was drunk. This is not the first time he has made statements like this. He's done it many, many times in the past. He's made comments to guys like Booker T, Bobby Lashley, and others. And apparently a publicly traded company, once word got out, they felt they had to move. He has been suspended. There is no guarantee he'll come back, although it's wrestling, and after 60 days, as in the Jeff Hardy case, a lot of people forget a lot of things.
There has been some talk that this is not the first time this has happened, and I've even saw a good deal of speculation that this may, similar incident or incidents may be what the reason, and I'm just drawing a total blank, Brian.
Bobby Lashley.
Bobby Lashley, yes, was released with such a sweet deal from WWE as well. This is 2008. It is time for companies to step up and do something. There are more background issues than just what happened. This is, I think, just a small example of it's just like the old saying, you only see the tip of the iceberg, and I'm afraid that may be what's happening here. What's going to end up happening if they don't get a rein on this type stuff, and then there was another incident, I think, mentioned, perhaps another hazing type situation that may have went on in the last couple of weeks as well that could get a couple more people in trouble, but this has to be reined in. WWE is no longer just an old boys club of regional promoters. They're a $1 billion company, and some of the things that have come to light there, if they happen in other $1 billion mainstream companies, would be dealt with rather harshly. One of the things that's quite disturbing to me is if this does in fact involve Mark Henry. Just a few months ago, they were promoting him as the self-proclaimed silverback, which could be construed as being racially insensitive as well. And What's even more disturbing about that is if somebody come up with that idea for him as a gimmick, it's bad enough. But if in fact, even if the best case scenario, even if Mark Henry was in fact proclaiming himself, I, Mark Henry, am a silverback, somebody somewhere should have had enough sense to go, well, wait a minute, that may not be the most sensitive thing we can do here. This can't end well. So some higher up, some official should have called that to begin with. I don't think, from the people I've talked to and what I've been told about the situation, that I don't believe Mark Henry was in fact the one who came up with the silverback gimmick, or he was. In other words, he was not in fact the self-proclaimed silverback. But even if he was, it was a terrible idea that someone should have caught beforehand. If you think a large dark-skinned African-American football player would get the NFL's permission to call himself the silverback, you already know what the answer is. Of course they wouldn't do that. And WWE needs to be a little more proactive in catching some of this stuff, because I have no reason to believe that particular gimmick or tag led up to the latest incident. But from what we've heard, that this is not an isolated incident, and there are a few former professional wrestlers of African American descent walking around Atlanta, Georgia to this very day that are far more wealthy than they used to be because of old attitudes like that may have been more socially acceptable 20 or 30 years ago, right or wrong. Certainly not today, though, and the things are moving in the right direction, and they need to continue to do that. And but at the same time, let's don't overblow it. Maybe Michael Hayes could benefit from some type of sensitivity training or something like that. But he is, irregardless of his job title, if he is writing these shows, he is in a position to make these people look good or bad, and he needs to take that responsibility very seriously. And these old attitudes and they need to fall by the wayside. It's time to move on to something else.
Now, given what you've heard about this situation and the number of times that it has happened and different things you've heard, do you believe that Michael Hayes is a racist?
Well, I don't want to sit here and say I know Michael Hayes personally. I've met Michael Hayes on several different occasions, and I did know Terry Gordy, I guess, better than any of the former Freebirds, and just based on the stories he told me and stuff, no, I don't really think so. I think he has generational ideas, the generation he's from, and the same area. He's from the same part of the country I am, and unfortunately, those ideas and attitudes have not completely died out yet, but they have no place in a $1 billion company nowadays, and that's the thing that needs to be addressed. No, I don't think Michael Hayes is. He's never certainly come across to me that way, and I've never, but again, I'm not a dark-skinned African-American working under him. I may have a different opinion if I were, and irregardless, it's insensitive whether he's racist or not. That type of language is insensitive and doesn't have a place in today's society or a $1 billion publicly traded company.
Now, I know that you can't speak too much about the lawsuit in WCW because you were involved in certain ways in that, but any thoughts on the Hardbody Harrison sentenced to life imprisonment deal? Quite an irony, really, when you think about it.
Oh yeah, because he was involved in that particular lawsuit and stuff, and that's a sad situation. One of the people I used to work with when we were promoting wrestling shows, Rick Gillespie out of Baltimore, knew Hardbody Harrison a lot more than I did. In fact, during the whole time of the lawsuit, the racial discrimination lawsuit was going on in Atlanta, I never did meet Hardbody Harrison during that whole deal. He was his depositions and so forth were a different time than mine were. But that is a disturbing situation there, and he's appears to be paying the price. But in that same situation has a lot of parallels to what's going on in WWE right now. A lot of that stuff started out with the trainers and people in a booking position using insensitive, outdated language, and it built to a pretty sizable settlement for several wrestlers. And now that you have the possibly the Bobby Lashley situation, and you have the now the Mark Henry deal going on, and there may have even been some other hazing incidents involving some other minority wrestlers recently. They're sitting on a powder keg if they think that courts are handing out money over situations like that. They really need to get a rein on that sort of stuff.
You think this was a good proactive move on their part, or do you think that? I guess the question I could ask is these things have been happening for a long time, and this was the first time that they acted. Do you think that there was a reason that they did it at this point, or do you think that they just felt enough is enough?
No, I think it's a good move on their part. I think it's a good.
It's obviously a good move, but my question is, do you trust that they did this move out of the goodness of their hearts, or do you think maybe there had been some pressure put on them for certain reasons?
Well, I think there was some pressure put on them for certain reasons. I mean, there is another hazing incident I'm aware of, and I'm sure you are too, involving two other people. One of them could be considered a management official, and we'll see if any disciplinary action comes of that. I think there should be some mandatory sensitivity training or education before these people are brought back, and that should be the routine. And everybody who is involved in something like that should expect to get a suspension or have to undergo some sort of education, and then we'll see if those attitudes change and so forth. At least this hopefully will be a deterrent for future actions, but I don't know. I think maybe the Bobby Lashley situation may have opened some eyes in that company, and I hope it did.
We were talking also about the pay-per-view tonight. I want to run down the results very quickly. We had Matt Hardy beating MVP for the U.S. title. Kane beat Chavo to retain the ECW title. Great Khali Lee lost the Big Show in a horrible match. And Batista versus Shawn Michaels is going on as we speak. Don't think we've got a finish yet, but that is the update there. Carl, I wanted to ask you also, we talked about this a bit last week, but your take on the Caleb Starnes incident at the UFC pay-per-view.
The
running.
Oh, yes.
The running man.
Caleb Starnes. Wow. What do you... That was an embarrassment of... I'm speechless. I mean, what can... I don't know, I haven't read anything about it lately. Has he made any kind of statement about, what in possibly was in his mind during that fight?
Well, he's made a few different statements. I think the first one was that he was hurt, like he hurt his foot or something of that nature. But if you watch the show, he was running before.
During the fight, is he saying he was injured during the
fight?
Well,
during
the
fight,
there didn't seem to be anything wrong with his feet to me.
No, there's that as well.
Something better than that, I think. Maybe a shoulder injury, but.
Are you someone who thinks that we need yellow cards? Or do we just need to get rid of geeks like this?
You need to get rid of geeks like that, but I wouldn't be opposed to yellow cards. Although, in all fairness, UFC doesn't really run into that kind of situation very often. They've never run into anything like that before. That was just ridiculous. But as far as just really stalling out boring fights. UFC is pretty good about their officials are pretty good about standing people up and getting things restarted. But then you run into something totally new. Well, this guy was already standing up. He was just falling the fight in reverse. So
perhaps he should have been laid down.
Yeah, I almost would have liked to have saw a disqualification in that situation. And I don't know if that is legally permissible under the unified rules or whatever. But
disqualified for sucking.
if somebody's just obviously not fighting, I would think that would call for disqualification.
Sure. And Carl, we were talking about the Hackenschmidt-Gotch match from 1908. It was 100-year anniversary a couple of days ago, and what did that match mean for wrestling history?
Well, it was really the first of a two-part series of events, series of matches that made professional wrestling in a odd kind of way. It is remembered, both the Gotch Hackenschmidt matches. One was, of course, in 1908, the first one. The second one was in 1911, and both were in Chicago, Illinois. In the first match, the one of the 100-year anniversary just passed on April 3rd. That was really the beginning, the birth of what all modern World Heavyweight Championships have tried to link themselves back to. Now, they get the year wrong half the time. They sometimes they call it 1904, sometimes, 1912, I've even heard used, but it was 1908. George Hackenschmidt was a very prominent bodybuilder and weightlifter over in Europe, and was on a tremendous run as a professional wrestler. Now, whether his whether his matches were worked or not is a matter of a lot of speculation. I personally believe most of them were, in fact, worked matches, but he was the World Heavyweight Champion. He had won various tournaments in a number of European countries, and he came over here to the United States to wrestle the American Heavyweight Champion, who was Frank Gotch. He had won the title a couple years earlier, actually about 4 years earlier, from Tom Jenkins. And so you had what would now be recognized all over the world as a true World Heavyweight Championship. And Frank Gotch, of course, won both the matches, both this match and the rematch. The first match was a 2-hour-long match, which Gotch eventually won by his what's the equivalent to an ankle lock submission nowadays. But George Hackenschmidt immediately accused Frank Gotch of doing all kinds of heel tactics, oiling his body, and perhaps even rubbing oil into Hackenschmidt's eyes, and just gouging and scratching, and a number of tactics that would be heelish in nature at that point of time. This led to the rematch in 1911, which is, I guess, the more famous of the two, because it's the one that everybody talks about. Gotch may or may not have hired somebody to injure Hackenschmidt while training. That's kind of been one of those famous wrestling myths that has passed down through the years, and who knows if it's really true or not. There's even a lot of debate about who injured the knee of George Hackenschmidt. But those two matches were, without a doubt, the biggest matches until the modern era of pro wrestling. Nothing really since that time up until the WrestleMania era really stood up to those matches in terms of the number of people there, the gates, and the dollar amounts, increased for inflation, were on par with some of the WrestleManias and stuff. So it was a huge, huge deal. Now, what it also did was sort of turn the press against pro wrestling. The second Gotch match, Hackenschmidt match, was ripped apart in the papers, and in fact, it was said by several papers that it gave wrestling a black eye it would never recover from, and by gosh, it just about never has. So it was a completely different world then, but it certainly set wrestling on a path to become what it ultimately has ended up to today, which is more of a entertainment worked spectacle than a true athletic contest.
And I've asked many times before, but anything new on the possibilities of ever getting any sort of footage of these matches?
I seriously doubt it. We know they were taped. I don't know about the first one for certain, but we know for a fact the second Gotch Hackenschmidt match was taped, because there were ads for charging people to come see it at the theaters. There were actually some of the photographs that were released only in the last few years there are video cameras there. And but unfortunately, the top film that was taped on is very unstable, and the belief is if it did exist today, it will be unrecoverable, and nobody has ever saw it in the modern era. There have been people who have claimed to, but it's never turned up. And if it was out there, I think by now we would know about it, or it would be deteriorated to the point where we couldn't do anything with it.
A couple of notes here. The Shawn Michaels-Batista match. Shawn Michaels won. Batista went for the Batista bomb, and Shawn shimmied out, and then acted like he blew out his knee. The referee, Jericho, went to keep Batista away from him, and then Shawn jumped up and did a super kick for the pin. And they did have a bunch of referees help Shawn to the back afterwards, so they're playing it up like it was a real injury, but the way the finish came, it appeared that it was not a legitimate injury in the middle of the match, but said to be very, very good. And that's that. So we're going to the women's title match next, and that should be quite a little cluster. But I would like to note we've got two emails here. Mike Sempervivi writes that Henry Akinwand, I'm not the boxing guy here, so Akinwand, I may have screwed that up. Anyway, he was disqualified by Mill Lanes in a fight against Lennox Lewis for excessively clinching, and that means there's a precedence for DQs on stalling. And then Anthony here writes in that Wikipedia, in the section on the unified rules, states that timidity, including without limitation, avoiding contact with an opponent, intentionally or consistently dropping the mouthpiece or faking an injury, constitutes a foul under the unified rules. And thus perhaps he could have been disqualified. So
yeah, that sounds like that should have definitely have been a disqualification then for that fight.
We have a bunch of questions here, or a bunch of callers. So let's start with James in Florida who wants to talk about Benoit. James, what's going on?
Hi, Tyler. Hey, guys. How are you doing?
Hey, how you doing?
I have to say I really liked that rendition of Gypsy Rose Lee on your show, but enough of that. I got to say about the Monday Night Raw thing, I loved Regal winning the King of the Ring, but there was one moment that absolutely made me cringe. I don't know if anybody else caught this.
I did.
When he
Yes.
Okay, with Hornswoggle?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why?
You know, a lot of people, I made mention of that, and I had some people saying, you're reading too much into this. John Cena has done the crossface. Other guys have done the crossface. Why is it a big deal? And the reason it's a big deal is because Hornswoggle's character is that of a child. And that is according to the police report, a hold very similar to that was used by Chris Benoit to kill his son Daniel. And, I mean, Regal is a friend of Benoit's, and I just don't know how... I mean, I can see that the idea was that they wanted to get his finisher over, but you've got 3 matches. I mean,
why not use it on Finlay or another guy, like Punk, like he did?
I'm saying, if he would have used it on Punk to win the entire tournament, it would have been over. If he would have used it on 2 guys and won the tournament, it would have been over. He didn't have to use it on Hornswoggle. I mean, obviously the idea was, well, the first match shows that he's ruthless and he'll do anything, and the second match shows he can cheat and exploit a body part, and the third match will show that he's just a bad man, but they didn't need to do it. I can't believe that nobody noticed it, and yeah, I cringed as well.
Well, Carl, since you're a Leo, Carl, law enforcement officer, maybe you could relate with me on this, because during the Hall of Fame, there was one point when they mentioned Chris Benoit's name, and he just got a huge ovation. At that point, I just started walking out and saying, I just can't be here. I don't blame Ric Flair for mentioning him. That was a part of his career. But for all these fans just to go crazy over a man's name who killed his wife and child, a man who I would be prosecuting if he were to have lived and were to have committed that crime in my district, you know? It just really bothers me. And, Carl, I don't know if it bothers you either, but...
Yeah, I agree. It was disturbing, and you know, God only knows what went through it. That, you know, I don't know. It left me speechless too. I agree with you.
You know, I want to ask you, Carl, and James as well, if you have any thoughts on this. When I think about fans cheering Chris Benoit after what he did, it always is like, I'm always amazed by it and baffled by it, and I try and think of reasons why they would do such a thing. And one of the only things that I can come up with is I think there are some fans that were appalled with what he did, but want to separate what he did at the end with what he did during his career. And because WWE has tried to erase him from history, it's almost like whenever there's a mention made of him, like it gets through, they are happy to see it get through. I don't know if that's why. I don't know if people just want to not think about one of the guys that they loved watching wrestle doing this, but it just, I don't understand it, and Carl, do you have any thoughts on why that might be?
Yeah, I think it has something to do with the divide between the accomplishments and the person. I can't think of an example that comes to my mind right now of maybe an actor who has done something, totally horrible, but yet his body of film work still, may stand up as something good. You can relate it in a way to O.J. Simpson. He is probably the only close equivalent to what Chris Benoit is, and it's very hard to look back. It doesn't diminish what he did as a football player. He was still an incredible football player, and his records were amazing, but boy, you sure don't look back at it in the same light as you once did, and it's very awkward. It really is awkward. Chris Benoit, irregardless of how horrible a human being he may or may not have been, it don't take away from the fact he was an incredible wrestler. He was a standard for pro wrestling, but wow, now when you look back at it, it sure is colored with a different thing. To me, it's more awkward than anything. I mean, I still can't go back and watch old Chris Benoit matches as much as I loved them and enjoyed them. And some of those old Super J Cups and things like that, I just can't watch them anymore because as fabulous as they are, it's just you're seeing them in a whole different light now.
Well, I was thinking about this because a lot of fans will still cheer Jimmy Snuka, but most fans don't know he may or may not have been involved in the death of his girlfriend at the time. That was never criminally proven. I don't even think a charge was brought. In addition, a lot of fans cheer Steve Austin, and I think very few fans realize that here's a man who was convicted of beating his wife. And it's stuff like that but bothers me about this is the fans know it this time. And I could appreciate Chris Benoit as an athlete too, and I can appreciate the fact that he probably was not mentally all there, especially with the research that Chris Nowinski came out with. But I don't know, guys. Maybe you all being closer to the business than me, can understand it a little bit better. But it just bothers me still.
Well, I don't, and I would actually like to, maybe one day send out a request, people anonymously emailing, or I would withhold people's names, and people that cheer Chris Benoit, and just, tell us why. You know what I mean? I would like the answer to that question, but, I don't know if we'd ever get any answers, so.
Guys, thanks for letting me talk and vent a little bit, and hope you guys have a great show, okay? Nice talking.
All right, thanks very much. Wanted to run down the results very quickly of the Backlash pay-per-view. Matt Hardy beat MVP for the U.S. title. Kane retained over Chavo Guerrero. Big Show beat the Great Khali. Shawn Michaels beat Batista after supposedly injuring his knee, but then hitting a super kick out of nowhere. And in the Big 12 Diva Tag Team Battle, Beth pinned Ashley. Here's a finish for you with her suplex. Didn't really get much of a recap of that particular battle. But
one thing we haven't mentioned yet, and that's the new announcer apparently for SmackDown.
That's right. We haven't mentioned that. Go ahead.
I guess he's working this show, Mick Foley.
Mick Foley has replaced the coach, at least on this show. I don't know if it's permanent over the entire thing, but I'm just wondering why no one has replaced Mike Adamle yet. It's now been 2 weeks. Come on.
Well, now, yeah. Well, I'm wondering if Foley is the permanent replacement if Coach heads to ECW now, because it's going to take a while for this Adamle guy to grow on me, I have to admit.
Apparently Adamle called the Chavo versus Kane match, and they were making fun of him on the air as well, so I don't know. The fact that they've made fun of him on every show pretty much at this point means they know he sucks and they don't care.
Yeah, it's in a way he's almost entertaining to watch now. I went from going, get this guy off my television as fast as possible to just let him stick around, let's see what he says next kind of thing. Kind of train wreck television.
Edge and Undertaker is up right now, so it looks like they're going to be going quite a while. And then I would presume that the main event is going quite a while as well. Are there only 7 matches on this show?
Yeah, it would look like a pretty short lineup.
I'm going to have to check that out here. I believe that that's correct. So, let's check. There are, in fact, only 7 matches on this show. So there is 1 hour between the 2 world title matches, Kane and, Randy Orton, Cena, Triple H, and JBL, and then the world title match. So this will probably get 15 minutes with entrances. Undertaker's entrance is usually a while, and then obviously the entrances for the main event are going to take a bit, and then it's 4-way elimination, so that could be quite a long match as well. So we're down to the final 2 matches here, and we won't be able to update them all here on the air, but you can always go to figure4online.com. That's our website. We will be doing ongoing play-by-play for the rest of the night, so you can check that out. It's figure4online.com. Plus, of course, a bunch of other audio shows with myself, Carl Stern, and others, so make sure you check that out. Let's go to the phones. We've got Greg in California that wants to talk about Vickie Guerrero. Greg, are you there? You have to speak up. We can barely hear you.
All right, how long do you guys think that they're going to keep Vickie Guerrero around? It seems like a Gil thing. She's really dragging the show down. It's gotten down to more like a pity deal. They got Teddy sitting back there who's got the charisma to kind of carry that show, if you know what I mean.
Well, I think that early on, I mean, I thought early on a lot more of if you want to give her a job to be nice, that's fine. Give her a job doing something, or just send her a check every month or whatever you want to do. But I think she's actually become a pretty great heel on that show right now. And I think that the fact that they've still got Teddy Long standing behind her, looking upset at every show, suggests that at some point there's going to be some sort of resolution, and Teddy's going to get his job back. But I don't think it's going to be anytime soon. I think they've still got a lot of stuff they can do with La Familia. They just put those guys together, and unless something ends tonight at the pay-per-view, I would think they've got a ways to go. Carl, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think we've got to wait now till Rey Mysterio returns so he can get his get back on track. That was the main storyline between those two to begin with, and I think now it's going to be at least until after he returns.
Yeah,
she'll be around.
I also have another question, if I could ask you, kind of off of off something else. I hear how the WWE is supposed to be a real difficult place to work, and yet I see wrestlers who are big names that leave that you would think could be a headliner at TNA. I think of Jericho and Big Show, for example. What is it that you think that draws them back to WWE? Is it just the money, or?
Well, I know that Jericho, when he was interviewed shortly after, it was sometime either before or right after he came back to WWE, and he was asked about TNA. He'd been negotiating with them, and he was not just playing around. He was seeing what they would offer and how much money and exposure and that sort of thing. And what it always came down for him was, he feels like WWE is the big show. It's the place to be in this business, and that's where he wants to be, and so that's why he re-signed with WWE. I mean, I'm sure that they probably offered him a good deal of money to come to TNA, but he's one of those guys that feels that WWE is the be-all and end-all in this business, and to him, TNA would be a step down. And I would suspect that Big Show feels the same way. And I think that's sort of just the situation with a lot of guys. They figure that TNA is going to get 1.3 million viewers, and Raw's going to get 5 million, and Raw's the big show, so they may as well go there.
Yeah. So would you say it's that bad over there at WWE, or it's just, like I say, it's just the money that's drawing them back that they'll put up with all the nonsense?
Well, I mean, there's going to be nonsense anywhere you go, and it really depends on what you can put up with. I mean, There's some guys in WWE that are unhappy, but you're going to find some guys in TNA that are unhappy as well. There's positives and negatives of both companies, and in WWE, unless you're just completely being buried and not taken seriously, then I think the money's good enough, and the exposure and the fame is enough that it draws people back there. So that would be my guess.
All right, well, great, yeah, because I listen to a lot of people sit there and say working for McMahon is, like going to hell and back. And once they're gone, they're gone and they don't ever want to come back. And then, I watch these guys leave, and you think they could. I mean, like I use Jericho and Phil for example, who could basically write a ticket wherever they wanted, you would think, if they return. But anyway, hey, I appreciate your guys' information on that. Have a great evening.
All right, well, thank you very much for the call. Carl, do you have any thoughts on that last call?
No, I think you summed it up pretty good. Most everybody sees. I mean, even if you're in WWE, even if you're getting the we don't have anything for you right now. We're going to give you the least thing we can give you to do, which is working ECW. You're still showing up in front of as many people as TNA is. I mean, it is, most everybody views WWE as the big show, and there is such a gap between WWE and TNA that unless you've just got a real strong work ethic and you want to, in your mind, and I think this is what Kurt Angle's position was, that you think you can help bring TNA up closer and you're willing to work hard at doing that. I don't think it's somewhere you just want to go if you're just going to be part of the show.
Let's head to, I believe, Stanley in Reno, who has a question about Rock and Austin. Stanley, what's going on?
How you guys doing tonight?
How you doing?
Hey, man, I appreciate it. It's an honor to speak with you folks. And I had 2 quick points, and I'll just comment and let you tell me off there so I don't take a lot of your time up. But what happened to the big talkers? Like the Hulk Hogans and the Stone Colds, the guys that would talk and get a good pop, really didn't need to wrestle, just go on the in-ring stuff and mention a bunch of stuff and cut a promo on somebody and get a big pop. I really don't see that much anymore. And the second part of that question is, it seems like wrestling, everybody knows it's stage and all this stuff, but the chair stuff and this stuff, is it getting more realistic to me? I don't know if it's a little more physicality. It seems like it's more real than fake. And I can't go one more point, I'll take it out there. How come Chris Canyon got blackballed from wrestling? And that's it. I appreciate it, fellas. Thank you.
No problem. Who did you hear who was asking about the final question there, Carl?
No, I didn't hear it real well. No.
Somebody got blackballed. I didn't hear who that was. But the first part of the question, as far as just great talkers, I think part of the problem nowadays is when guys are brought up to WWE, you're given a scripted promo that you have to read, and they have very little faith in anybody except the long-running guys, and even a guy like Ric Flair, all of his promos were scripted, and when you're out there just reading from a script, it's very hard to cut the same kind of promos that guys could cut in the 70s and 80s and such, and you had a few guys here and there that had their way, like Rock and Austin, and they were great promos and were able to do great promos without scripting, and I think that's why their promos were great. But nowadays, it's much harder to get guys like that, and you got to be really good to be really good with scripted material, and
yeah, I think that's one of the things that's hurt wrestling more than it's helped it over the years, and that is the scripted promos, because while everything it does make the bad ones better, it makes the potentially great ones bland. And in the old days, they solved that problem by putting you with a mouthpiece. You put somebody with a Jim Cornette or a Jimmy Hart or someone like that and let them do the talking for you. And also, you put in, you didn't, in the old days, just stand in the middle of the ring and cut a promo about whatever you were doing. You stood with an announcer, and he led you through a promo about whatever. You had great, guys like Gordon Solie was really good about that, and even he doesn't really get the credit he deserves about that, but Gene Okerlund was really good about leading people through promos and stuff. And so I think that's one of the old school things I would like to see brought back is less scripting of promos, and guys who aren't strong, put them with a mouthpiece or a good announcer who can sort of lead them through that stuff.
apparently the last caller, the person he asked about was Chris Kanyon, if he had been blackballed from wrestling. And I think that blackballed is probably the wrong term to use in the case of Kanyon. I think it was a situation where WWE was done with him, and TNA didn't have a lot of interest in him, and thus he didn't come up with a story about being gay, because I'm sure that he is gay, but I think that he may have tried to make that into a bigger deal than it really was, because there are gay people in WWE and TNA right now, and they still have a job, and I don't think that anything like that was resulted in him being blackballed from the business. Carl, any thoughts?
No, I think you're right. I think you're right about that. I do think they missed an opportunity with him when he returned from injury that time. They could have done something with him there, but so much for that. I mean, I think he's kind of overblown it a little bit, but that's. I guess that's a matter of personal opinion. He doesn't think so.
And so much for this show. We're completely out of time. Carl, I want to thank you very much for doing the show today. For more with Carl and myself, you can check out Figure4Online.com. We're going to finish the ongoing Backlash play-by-play on the website, so check it out, Figure4Online.com. We will not be live next week. I will be unavailable, so we'll be back live in 2 weeks. This coming week will be a recap show, so make sure you check that out. So that's it. We'll talk to you in 2 weeks. This is Wrestling Observer Live on the Sports Byline Radio Network.